Thanksgiving, when the candles were barely lit and everyone was pretending to be grateful, my dad stood up like he was delivering a sermon. "We're selling the family business," he said. "You're getting nothing." Gavin actually cheered. Mia lifted her phone as if this were premium content for her followers. I didn't move. I pressed my napkin flat against my lap and asked, calm as ever, "Who's the buyer?" He smirked, certain he held all the power. That was the moment he had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Nova Hart, and for most of my life I was the quiet shadow in a family that loved the sound of its own greatness. If you'd walked into our Boston home growing up, the 6-bedroom colonial with trimmed hedges and a pool no one actually swam in, you'd have seen framed photos of my siblings everywhere. Gavin, posing like a winner. Mia, twirling in recital dresses she barely practiced for. And somewhere near the staircase, a picture of me, usually half hidden behind someone taller. That was the rhythm of our household. Whoever shined the least faded the fastest. My father, Victor, built our software company the same way he ruled the dinner table, loud, certain, and convinced he was always right. To him, legacy meant a bloodline of men taking over the business. Women filled the spaces around that idea, but never the center. When I was accepted into a top tech program, he called it cute. When Gavin slept through half his college classes, Dad called it potential. Mom, Elaine, floated around the edges of every argument with a wine glass and a soft apology. She'd been raised to maintain peace even at the cost of her children's dignity. So when Dad shut me down, she pressed my hand under the table and said nothing out loud. That silence shaped me more than any criticism. The turning point came when I was 22. I'd spent months designing a new integration solution the company desperately needed. I rehearsed my presentation for days. 10 minutes into the boardroom meeting, Dad cut me off with a laugh. "This is theoretical nonsense," he said in front of men twice his age and 10 times as proud. The humiliation hit so sharply my legs shook under the table. I walked out of that room knowing the company would never belong to me because it had never been allowed to. So I left Boston. No goodbye dinner. No dramatic exit speech. Just a studio apartment in San Francisco, ramen nights, cheap coffee, and 70-hour work weeks where no one knew my last name. That anonymity was freedom. I built my first product alone, my second with a freelance team. The third attracted real investors. Eventually, the empire I built quietly and deliberately became the sort of company my father's firm would one day beg for help. Every Thanksgiving I still came home, and the dynamic never changed. Gavin bragged about big accounts he didn't earn. Mia live-streamed every corner of the house, narrating her life like a reality show. Dad barely looked up. But this year felt different the moment I stepped through the door. Dad kept slipping into his study, lowering his voice whenever footsteps approached. Gavin strutted around like he'd already inherited something. Mia, usually glued to her phone, watched Dad with an anticipatory sparkle, like a kid waiting for fireworks. I should have sensed what was coming. But I had a secret of my own. The second evening I was home, I noticed the house had a pulse, a hum of people waiting for a moment they thought would break me. Dad's study door was cracked just enough for his voice to spill through. "Yes, the offer stands. 50 million. We sign after the holiday." A pause. "No, my children won't be involved." "It's better they don't know." 50 million. A secret sale. No involvement. My fingers tightened on the railing. The family business wasn't just revenue. It was his identity, his pride, the throne. He'd always shoved Gavin toward running it without conversation. That wasn't oversight. It was deliberate erasure. I leaned closer. "Yes, Everest Holdings," he said. "They're eager. We'll close immediately after Thanksgiving." The name hit like a stone dropped in dark water. I didn't react outwardly. I stepped away before he sensed me. My heartbeat settled into something cold, patient, and sharp. In the kitchen, Rosa chopped herbs and hummed. "You all right, Miss Nova?" she asked. I smiled. Never better. For the first time I could see the entire board, every piece, exactly where I'd left it. Later that night, in the living room, Gavin sprawled across the couch recounting a client win he hadn't earned. Mia posed under the best lighting, narrating her follower count spike. Dad sat by the fireplace with a glass of scotch, radiating the smugness he mistook for leadership. "So, Nova," Gavin said, swirling his drink. "Still doing your little tech consulting thing?" I almost laughed. Instead I asked, "And how's the company's third-party spending? Everything balanced?" His jaw flickered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing," I said lightly. "Just curious how tightly you're managing those payments." Color drained from his face. Because he knew, and I knew. 300,000 missing over 3 years, buried under fabricated vendor entries and urgent bills. Dad had no idea. I did. Mia, sensing tension, lifted her phone. "Should I go live? People love family drama." "No," Dad barked. "Not tonight." But the fuse had already been lit. I sat back and let the quiet stretch. Tomorrow at dinner, he would announce his big secret. I would reveal mine. Thanksgiving morning broke cold and bright. The New England light made the house look softer than the people inside it. In the kitchen, pots clattered, Rosa hustled, the oven door slammed. The smells should have been comforting. Instead, they pressed against my ribs like a weight. At the table, place cards showed the same hierarchy: Dad at the head, Gavin at his right, Mia at his left, Mom opposite, and me tucked at the far corner like an afterthought. I didn't mind. Corners are where you see everything. Dad barely acknowledged me as I passed. He was reviewing documents, my documents, neatly printed and clipped into a folder. He didn't realize my legal team had prepared. His confidence was almost tender, like watching a man polish the chains he didn't know were already locked around his wrists. "Busy morning," I said lightly. "Important business," he replied. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with." I let the condescension slide. It didn't hurt anymore. It only confirmed that today was necessary. Dinner began with the usual stiffness. Mom insisted we go around the table sharing gratitude. Gavin bragged about the account win. Mia thanked her followers. Dad praised the legacy he'd built. I said nothing. Gratitude would come later. The tension snapped when dessert arrived. Dad tapped his glass. The sound sliced through the chatter. He rose, shoulders squared like he always did when performing power. "I've made a decision," he announced. "One that secures the future of our family name." A dramatic pause. "I'm selling the company." Gasps. Gavin's fork clattered. Mia's phone shot up like a reflex. "To who?" Gavin sputtered. Dad lifted his chin. "Pride swelling," he said. "Everest Holdings. The deal is $50 million. And no, none of you will receive shares. You'll forge your own paths." All eyes eventually landed on me because I was the only one smiling. He thought he was freeing himself of the empire he built. He had no idea he was handing it to me. The room didn't fall silent at once. It collapsed in waves. A stunned inhale from Mia. The scrape of Gavin's chair. The soft cough of one of Dad's advisors. Dad mistook their shock for admiration. He always did. "This decision ensures our legacy," he continued. $50 million finalized tomorrow morning." Mia's mouth fell open. Gavin's face went red. Mom stared at her plate. I let out a soft breath, half laugh, half relief. This was the moment I'd built toward. 10 years of sleepless nights, ramen dinners, coded prototypes, reinvested revenue, and strategic acquisitions. 10 years of being unseen, underestimated, and ignored. "Interesting," I said. "Because I am Everest Holdings." Silence. Actual silence. Thick, ringing silence. Even Mia forgot to film. Dad blinked, confused, like I'd told a joke with the wrong punchline. "What?" he asked. "I am Everest Holdings," I repeated. "The founder, the majority stakeholder, the person whose signature will finalize the contract tomorrow." Confusion cracked into shock, then anger. "That's impossible," he snapped. "Everest Holdings is run by Emily Stone. She's a tech investor." "M. Stone," I corrected gently, short for Nova Emerson Hart, my legal name. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a business card. Matte black embossed lettering, simple and unmistakable. His hand trembled as he picked it up. "This is absurd," he said. "This can't be." "It is," I said. "When I left Boston 10 years ago, I didn't fail. I built. I founded a company, scaled it, acquired others, and expanded into enterprise tech. I studied your quarterly reports, identified weaknesses, and positioned Everest as the perfect buyer." One of Dad's advisors coughed nervously. Another stared at me like I'd rewritten gravity. Gavin shot to his feet. "You manipulated us. You plotted against your own family." I turned to him, calm. "Everything I learned was public. Market data, vendor relationships, client histories, competitor performance, and your spending." Color drained from his face. Dad asked, "What spending?" Very calmly, I said, "Gavin has been filing payments to fabricated vendors over the last 3 years. Around 300,000. Rosa froze at the doorway, clutching a tray. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Mia whispered, "Oh my God." Gavin shouted, "That's a lie. You're making things up." "I have the records," I said. "Time-stamped entries, transfers to offshore accounts, IP logs from your office computer." His jaw clenched so hard his teeth clicked. Dad sank slowly into his chair as disbelief hit him like a slow-moving wave. "My own son embezzled from my company," he whispered. "No," I corrected. "From my company as of the board vote. Everest owns controlling interest. Legally, the transfer of ownership is complete." His eyes went glassy. Realization settled into him like frost. "This isn't just revenge," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "Revenge would have been destroying you publicly 10 years ago. This is reclamation." The chandelier buzzed. A fork clinked against a plate. The world felt hyperfocused. Each detail was sharp enough to cut. Mom finally spoke, voice shaking. "Nova, how long have you?" "Since the boardroom meeting when Dad told me my ideas were childish," I said. "Since he cut me off mid-sentence and told the room not to take me seriously. Since the day I realized I would never grow in the shadow he kept casting." Dad swallowed. "You're taking everything from me." I knelt so I was eye level with him. "No," I said. "I'm giving you a way out. You built something valuable. You expanded what Grandpa started. But the industry moved forward and you refused to. The sale protects the company, the employees, the legacy. I'm not destroying it. I'm saving it." Gavin scoffed. "You want to run it alone? Good luck." "I'm not running it alone," I replied. "I have a full executive team, operations, finance, and innovation." Mia asked quietly, mascara smudged. "And us? What happens to us?" I softened. "There's a place if you want one. Communications, branding, media strategy. But it starts with responsibility, not followers." She nodded slowly, stunned. "And me?" Dad asked, voice almost a whisper. "You'll be chairman emeritus," I said. "A respected advisor, but not decision maker. A symbolic role for a man who built the foundation but can't lead its future." He closed his eyes. It wasn't anger or pride. Maybe it was grief or acceptance. I stood and let the silence breathe. Dad looked up at me with something I'd spent my life chasing, but never expected to receive. Recognition. "You outgrew us," he said softly. "No," I replied. "I simply stopped shrinking." The room stayed frozen for several seconds before the noise of life crept back in, the hum of the vent, the clatter from the kitchen, Mia's sniffle. It was done. Not revenge. Restoration. I had reclaimed my name, my legacy, and my seat at the table. The morning after Thanksgiving felt strangely quiet, as if the house itself was trying to reset. Frost clung to the windows, softening the edges of everything that had cracked open the night before. By 8, the acquisition announcement went live. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from my executive team, industry reporters, clients congratulating Everest Holdings on its bold expansion.
Downstairs, I heard Dad's study door open and close.
No shouting this time. Just the sound of a man learning how to breathe in a world he no longer controlled.
Gavin left early, avoiding eye contact.
He paused once at the foyer mirror, looking at himself like he didn't recognize the reflection. He would repay the money.
He would rebuild if he chose to. Mia found me in the kitchen, voice small.
Did you really mean what you said about a real role?
Yes,
I told her.
But it starts with responsibility, not followers.
She wiped last night's mascara from under her eyes and nodded.
Mom approached quietly.
Your father is proud, even if he doesn't know how to say it yet, she said, touching my arm.
And so am I. By afternoon, Dad emerged from his study with no folder in hand and no lecture prepared.
Just a man walking toward his daughter with hesitant steps. I'll take the advisor position, he said, if you still want me there. I nodded.
It's where you belong,
I said. Just not where you used to be.
For the first time, we stood as something closer to equals. 6 months later, I walked through the renovated lobby of what was now Hart Everest Technologies.
Light poured through new glass walls, reflecting a company finally aligned with the future instead of clinging to the past.
Dad's photo still hung beside my grandfather's, unchanged.
A new frame stood beside them. Mine.
Not as the forgotten middle child, not as the daughter who didn't fit the business, but as the woman who carried it into its next chapter. Gavin checked in from his graduate program every few weeks, humbled but trying. Mia became an effective communications lead, trading vanity posts for real strategy.
Mom volunteered with organizations helping young women enter tech, determined not to repeat her silence.
As for me, I finally felt like I was standing in the life I'd been building all along, without asking anyone's permission. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should have seen you most clearly,
I hope my story reminds you that your value isn't theirs to decide.
Share your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.